The storm came without warning, a violent rush of sand and ice that whipped across the abandoned outpost. Marcus Veyron crouched behind a twisted metal beam, breathing hard, his veteran instinct screaming danger. He could barely see through the haze, but movement caught his eye, a tiny, fragile creature tumbling near the edge of a jagged cliff. Its wings were too small, its body too weak. It struggled, slipping closer to the void. "Not on my watch," Marcus muttered, sprinting across the unstable ground. His boots slipped in the sand, each step a gamble. With a desperate leap, he reached the hatchling just as the wind tore it from the ledge. He caught it in his arms, the little body trembling violently. Its pulse flickered like a faint blue flame, strange and beautiful against the storm's gray fury. A roar of machinery behind him made Marcus spin. One of the outpost's defense drones, long since malfunctioned, glared with a red sensor. It fired a quick energy pulse, missing Marcus by inches. Sparks danced around his boots. "Great," he muttered, tossing the hatchling over his shoulder and sliding behind a half-collapsed wall. Every instinct told him this storm wasn't natural. Something in the desert was stirring. The creature in his arms let out a tiny chirp, its glow intensifying with fear. Marcus noticed patterns in the light, brief flashes that pulsed in a rhythm almost like a warning. He had seen strange life forms in his years across war-torn worlds, but nothing like this. Even the older research reports had called them unremarkable, fragile experiments. Yet here, in real danger, they were alive and maybe more intelligent than anyone had realized. He pressed forward, scanning the ruined outpost for cover. Shattered walls and scorched machinery offered little shelter, and the storm's fury threatened to bury him alive. A larger shadow loomed ahead, a jagged ridge carved into the sand. Beyond it, he glimpsed more hatchlings clinging to the rocks, their tiny bodies glowing dimly. They were abandoned, left to die in the storm, yet somehow clinging to life. Marcus's heart tightened. "No one's coming for you," he said aloud, his voice almost lost in the wind. He began scooping up the remaining hatchlings, one by one, careful not to crush their fragile wings. Every motion was deliberate, every choice life or death. With each creature he saved, a spark of hope ignited inside him. He realized that this wasn't just survival, it was responsibility. He was the only one who cared enough to act. As he reached the last of the hatchlings, a sharp crack split the air. Marcus ducked instinctively. A drone, its sensors flickering erratically, crashed onto the sand nearby, releasing a pulse of energy that singed the ridge. The wind carried an eerie whistle, almost like a voice in another language. Marcus froze. The hatchling in his arms blinked at him, its glowing eyes scanning the horizon as if it understood more than it should. The ground beneath him shuddered. Something moved in the storm, far bigger than any machine he'd ever encountered. Marcus's pulse quickened. He had faced aliens, war zones, and deadly planets before, but this felt different. Alive. And it was coming closer. He stumbled forward, using his body as a shield as he sprinted toward a small cave partially hidden by debris. He dropped the hatchlings inside carefully, whispering reassurances he didn't entirely believe. One of them curled against his chest, its pulse calming slightly as if trusting him despite the chaos. Marcus let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He'd gotten them to safety for now. Then the storm shifted. A faint, low hum rose from the sand, vibrating through the metal debris and into Marcus's bones. The hatchling's pulses quickened, almost synchronizing, a soft, urgent pattern that hinted at communication. He crouched, squinting through the haze, and froze. Something massive, dark, and unidentifiable rose from the sandstorm, a silhouette larger than any human or drone. Its movements were deliberate, intelligent, and frighteningly silent. Marcus's mind raced. Was it a predator? An unknown alien? Or something connected to the hatchlings themselves? His hands clenched into fists. He had faced impossible odds before, but he had never felt the weight of responsibility like this. The creature paused, scanning the cave. The hatchling's glow flared brightly, and for a heartbeat, Marcus thought it might attack. Then, unexpectedly, it retreated into the storm, disappearing into the swirling sand. The immediate danger passed, but only temporarily. Marcus looked down at the hatchlings, their tiny bodies trembling, their glow fading to a soft pulse. He smiled grimly, brushing a strand of sweat and sand from his brow. "You're alive," he said. "And I'm not letting anyone take you. Not now, not ever." He knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere beyond the storm, something powerful watched. And Marcus realized he would have to be faster, smarter, and braver than he had ever been to keep these fragile dragons alive. A sudden flash of light in the distance caught his eye. A signal? A warning? Or the approach of more hunters? His heart skipped a beat as the storm howled around him, and the hatchling stirred nervously against his chest. Whatever it was coming, and Marcus had no choice but to face it head-on. The storm faded, leaving a cold, eerie silence over the canyon. Marcus pressed his back against the cave wall, eyes scanning the horizon. The hatchlings huddled around him, their faint blue pulses blinking like fragile stars in the dim light. He had saved them once, but the relief was short-lived. The sand-shifted ridge betrayed movement, human silhouettes. Not researchers. Not scientists. Hunters. They came back, Marcus muttered, sliding silently along the cave edge. His mind raced. The salvage teams were infamous for stripping planets bare, leaving nothing alive. They would destroy the hatchlings without hesitation. He had to act and fast. Outside, the hunters moved in coordinated lines, scanning for heat signatures. Marcus crouched low, scanning for any advantage. Then his eyes caught a pattern. The hatchlings' pulses brightened when the hunters came closer. A subtle reaction, almost instinctive. He frowned. Could the creatures communicate danger? Or was it a warning of something bigger? Either way, he had to use it. Marcus grabbed a length of twisted metal and some scorched wiring from the ruined outpost. Within minutes, he rigged a makeshift alarm, a trip line that would send sparks flying if crossed. Not much, but enough to slow the hunters down. He motioned to the hatchlings, gesturing them to stay low. One of the tiny dragons blinked at him, wings trembling, then pressed itself closer. Marcus felt a surge of determination. These creatures depended on him and he wouldn't fail. The first hunter tripped the wire. Sparks flew. The startled man cursed, and his attention snapped to Marcus's hiding spot. Marcus hurled a piece of debris, hitting a nearby rock to create a cloud of dust and confusion. The hunters shouted, searching frantically, but Marcus had already moved, dragging the hatchlings deeper into a narrow crevice. Their pulses glowed faintly in response, almost guiding him, and he realized this was no ordinary instinct. As he climbed, a harsh voice cut through the canyon. Stop. You can't hide them. A hunter appeared at the crevice's mouth, weapon drawn. Marcus froze, then acted on impulse. He lunged sideways, knocking the hatchling he carried behind a jagged boulder. Sparks from the hunter's gun arced harmlessly off the rock. The small dragon chirped, frightened but alive. Marcus gritted his teeth and sprinted up a narrow ledge. The hunter cursed again, disappearing into the dust. They were clever, but he was faster, smarter. Marcus set up another trap, a pile of loose stones balanced on a ledge. He hoped the hunter's weight would trigger a mini avalanche, giving him a chance to escape. As he moved, he glanced at the hatchlings. One, the smallest, blinked at him and lifted its head, mimicking the gesture he had made earlier to signal caution. Marcus's chest tightened. They were learning, understanding, responding. The hunters weren't giving up. The sound of their boots echoed across the canyon walls, steady, unrelenting. Marcus led the hatchlings through a narrow tunnel that widened into a small chamber, a natural shelter. He placed the hatchlings down gently, brushing the sand from their wings. Stay here, he whispered. I'll be back before they find us. But a sudden vibration in the floor froze him. Not from the hunters. Something larger. Something alive. Marcus's pulse quickened. From the shadows, a massive shape slithered into view. Its scales shimmered faintly, reflecting the hatchling's glow. Marcus realized with a start, the adult dragons weren't gone. One of them had followed. Or had been hiding all along. Its eyes, sharp, intelligent, met his. He didn't have time to think. The hunters' voices grew closer, shouting commands. Marcus used the adult dragon as a shield, keeping the hatchlings pressed close. Then an idea struck. He took a loose panel from the tunnel wall and slammed it onto the floor. Sparks flew, dust and sand obscured vision, and the hunters stumbled into confusion. Using the chaos, Marcus darted with the hatchlings through a hidden side passage revealed by the natural rock formations. By the time the hunters regrouped, Marcus had disappeared, leaving only faint blue pulses flickering in the darkness. The hatchlings, sensing safety, pressed together, their trust in him growing. Marcus paused, taking a breath. Each trap, each move had consequences. A misstep would mean death, for him, for them. And yet, he had survived, guiding them with courage and instinct. The storm of hunters was relentless, though. As he climbed a narrow ridge, Marcus glanced back. One hunter had managed to follow him, weapon aimed. Marcus's eyes scanned the cliffside. He spotted jagged rocks precariously balanced above the hunter. A swift kick sent them tumbling, creating a barrier of debris. The hunter fell back, screaming, buying Marcus precious seconds. He reached a small plateau and dropped to the ground, chest heaving. The hatchlings followed, their tiny bodies glowing softly against the orange dust. Marcus knelt, brushing a wing that had been scraped. "You're learning to survive," he said quietly. "And I'll teach you more." Suddenly, a low hum began under the rocks, a vibration he felt in his bones. The adult dragon nearby stiffened, wings tensing. Marcus froze. Something was coming, larger and stranger than the hunters. He didn't know what, but he knew one thing: escaping humans wasn't the only danger. The world itself held threats he couldn't predict, and the hatchlings were in the center of it all. His jaw tightened. He would not fail. Not this time. Not ever. And then a shadow moved across the plateau, massive, silent, and deliberate. Marcus's pulse quickened. He grabbed the nearest hatchling and crouched low, heart pounding. Whatever was coming, it wasn't human. And it was coming for them. Marcus pressed himself flat against the rocky wall, the hatchling quivering in his hands. The shadow loomed closer, silent but enormous, its presence vibrating through the ground. The adult dragon, perched nearby, hissed softly, wings spread, tail coiling like a whip. Marcus's mind raced. Whatever this was, it wasn't a hunter. It was alive, intelligent, and it knew the hatchlings. The creature stepped into a patch of weak sunlight, revealing its shape. Scales glimmered like polished stone, limbs long and sinewy, eyes glowing faintly with the same pulse as the hatchlings. Marcus's stomach twisted. He had seen big predators before, alien beasts, but this was different. It wasn't just hunting. It was assessing, judging. The hatchling's pulses quickened, a coordinated rhythm Marcus hadn't noticed before. One of the tiny dragons lifted its head and chirped in a sequence that made the adult dragon flinch. Marcus realized, almost in shock, that the hatchlings were signaling, or even communicating. His heart pounded. They're smarter than anyone believed. Smarter than me, maybe. He had no time to ponder. The creature let out a low, resonant hum. The air vibrated, carrying a strange energy that prickled his skin. Sand swirled violently around them. Marcus's first thought was to retreat, but the hatchlings' glowing bodies held his gaze, as if urging him to stand firm. They trust me, he thought, so I fight. Using the adult dragon as a shield, Marcus edged backward toward a narrow cave entrance he had spotted earlier. The shadow creature followed, each step precise, careful. Marcus grabbed a rock and hurled it, not to harm but to distract. The creature's eyes flickered in response, then it emitted a sharp pulse from its body. Marcus stumbled backward as the ground trembled, and the hatchlings glowed brighter, almost in panic. Instinct took over. Marcus leaned down to one of the hatchlings and mimicked its pulse pattern, a quick sequence he had noticed before. The small dragon's glow changed, following his rhythm. The creature paused. Marcus's pulse raced. It understands, somehow it understands. He repeated the pattern, subtly changing it to a defensive signal. The shadow hesitated, scanning, then slowly retreated a few steps. Breathing heavily, Marcus realized the truth. The dragons weren't defenseless. They had been abandoned, yes, but nature, or something older, had made them capable of protecting themselves, if guided by someone who understood them. And he understood them. At least partially. He moved deeper into the cave, the hatchlings following, their pulses syncing with his heartbeat. The adult dragon's eyes flickered toward him, almost approving. Marcus knelt, brushing sand off the smallest hatchling. "You're not alone," he whispered. "I've got you." The cave widened, revealing a hidden chamber filled with strange markings etched into the walls, ancient symbols that pulsed faintly under the dragon's glow. Marcus crouched beside one, running his fingers along the ridges. They weren't random. They seemed to match the patterns of the hatchling's pulses. A realization hit him like a hammer. These dragons weren't just creatures. They were part of something bigger, a network, a language he didn't fully understand. Suddenly, a low rumble shook the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling and a portion of the wall shifted, revealing a small alcove. Inside, Marcus glimpsed an injured adult dragon, scales broken, wing bent unnaturally. Its eyes opened, and for the first time, Marcus saw recognition, intelligence, pain, and something almost human in its gaze. The hatchlings surged toward it, chirping frantically. Marcus carefully lowered himself, holding back the smaller dragons. This is why they're abandoned," he murmured. "They're dangerous, maybe valuable. But alive, they're brilliant." The injured dragon struggled to stand, and Marcus noticed its pulse matched the hatchlings exactly. It was a signal. They were linked, part of a family network, or perhaps a species-wide consciousness. His chest tightened. If the hunters found this, they would destroy them all, not understanding what they had. Marcus acted quickly. Using his belt and scraps of metal from the cave floor, he fashioned a crude sling to stabilize the injured wing. The hatchlings chirped encouragement, wings fluttering as if aware he was trying to save their kin. The adult dragon let out a low, grateful rumble, nudging Marcus gently with its snout. A small payoff, but enough to fill him with hope. Then, without warning, the floor trembled violently. The cave's entrance rattled, and a familiar hum, like the energy pulse from the shadow outside, resonated through the chamber. Marcus froze, clutching the injured dragon. The hatchling's pulses intensified, synchronized like a heartbeat multiplied. The shadows shifted in the cave's mouth. A new figure emerged, not human, not machine. Something enormous, with glowing limbs and alien features, stepped into the chamber. Its eyes locked on Marcus and the dragons. Marcus's heart pounded. He had faced impossible odds before, but this felt beyond anything he had prepared for. The hunters were gone, but this was something else entirely. Yet even in the presence of the unknown, he did not falter. Marcus steadied himself, placing a hand gently on the injured dragon. "We're not leaving anyone behind," he said firmly. His voice carried conviction, courage, and determination. The hatchlings pulsed brighter, and for a brief, fragile moment, it felt as if the unknown creature was watching, not attacking, but considering. Then, without warning, it let out a resonant pulse that sent Marcus stumbling backward. The chamber's walls vibrated, stones rattling to the floor. The light in the hatchling's glow flickered rapidly. Marcus scrambled to shield them, heart hammering. The last thing he saw before the creature moved further into the cave's shadows was a glimpse of something even larger behind it, faintly outlined in the alien glow, a motion that promised far greater dangers and far deeper secrets. Marcus clenched his jaw. The fight was far from over. Marcus's lungs burned as he scrambled backward, shielding the hatchlings and the injured adult dragon. The chamber trembled under the weight of the alien presence. Whatever it was, it wasn't alone. Shadows shifted behind it, massive and flickering with strange, pulsating light. The air crackled with energy, and Marcus realized the hatchlings' pulses were reacting, not in fear but in warning. They were alive, aware, communicating a threat he barely understood. He had seconds to act. The hunters had been relentless, but this was worse. This was something ancient, something alive in ways no human had ever encountered. Marcus's mind raced. Retreat meant death. Defense meant improvisation. And his only weapons were courage, wits, and the fragile creatures he had sworn to protect. He scanned the chamber. Ancient alien markings lined the walls, resonating faintly under the dragon's glow. An idea sparked. He grabbed loose metal panels and wires scattered on the floor and fashioned a crude amplifier, connecting it to a rock embedded in the wall. It wasn't much, but if the dragon's pulses could manipulate matter even slightly, he could amplify the effect, create a barrier. "Trust me," he whispered to the hatchlings, holding the smallest against his chest. They chirped faintly, wings fluttering. The adult dragon growled low, a sound vibrating through Marcus's bones, but he sensed agreement. Together they could try. Together they had to. The alien stepped forward, massive claws scraping the stone floor. Its eyes glowed with intelligence as if testing Marcus. The hatchlings pulsed brighter, their bioluminescence spreading across the chamber in a synchronized rhythm. Marcus touched the metal device, trying to channel their energy. Sparks flew. The ground vibrated violently. Suddenly the hatchling's pulses surged, amplified by his device. A wave of energy rippled through the chamber. Stones lifted briefly, then fell, forming a jagged barrier between Marcus and the alien. It hissed, a sharp, resonant sound that made the air feel heavy. Marcus held his ground, heart pounding. "It's working." The alien advanced again, cautious but relentless. Marcus realized he needed more. He shouted instructions to the adult dragon, moving its body to position the hatchlings behind it. The creature hesitated, then obeyed, coiling around Marcus and the small dragons like a living shield. Together they formed a protective circle, their pulses in perfect harmony. The alien lunged. Marcus braced himself, sending a pulse through the amplifier. Energy crackled in the air, creating a barrier that slowed the creature. Sparks danced and dust swirled violently. The hatchlings chirped and pulsed faster, almost frantic, but Marcus kept rhythm, guiding them. Then, unexpectedly, a second figure emerged from the shadows. Larger, more ancient, glowing faintly with a purple light that seemed to pierce the chamber. Marcus's stomach dropped. The first alien was formidable. This one, he could feel its power in his bones. His mind raced. We're outmatched. Completely outmatched. But he did not falter. He could feel the hatchling's trust, the adult dragon's loyalty. He had faced impossible odds before and he had survived. He had to survive again, not just for himself but for them. Marcus yelled, commanding the dragon's attention. Focus. Now. The hatchlings pulsed in unison, their tiny bodies glowing brighter than ever. The adult dragon expanded its wings, creating a funnel for their energy. Marcus's crude amplifier amplified the pulses, sending a shockwave that rattled the walls. The first alien stumbled, claws scraping, letting out a long, piercing cry. The second alien recoiled slightly as if surprised. Marcus pushed further, coordinating the hatchling's energy with his own movements, guiding the pulse to a section of the cave ceiling. Rocks shifted, and a cascade fell, creating a barrier between the aliens and the dragons. He barely had a second to catch his breath before the first alien recovered, snarling and lunging again. He acted on instinct, using the rocks as a shield, dodging claws and energy pulses. The adult dragon leapt into the fray, wings flaring, tail swinging to knock the alien off balance. The hatchlings followed, pulsing in rhythm, their combined energy creating a shimmering barrier that slowed the predator's advance. Marcus could feel the sweat running down his face, his arms aching, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. The chamber trembled violently as the second alien roared, a sound that made the ground shake. Then, in a sudden, unexpected movement, it emitted a focused pulse of energy, far stronger than anything Marcus had seen. The amplifier overloaded, sparks flying, smoke filling the chamber. Marcus shielded the hatchling's, heart racing. For a tense heartbeat, everything froze. Dust hung in the air, the hatchling's pulses flickering weakly. Marcus held his breath, expecting the worst. Then the adult dragon roared, sending the first alien stumbling back. The hatchlings, recovering their rhythm, pulsed brighter than before. Marcus realized something impossible. The aliens weren't attacking anymore, they were testing. Studying. Waiting for something. He straightened, wiping blood and dust from his brow. We're not just survivors, he whispered. We're fighters. We're alive and we won't let you take them. The hatchlings chirped in agreement, their tiny bodies glowing warmly, fiercely. A final, massive pulse from the aliens shook the chamber, then silence. Marcus lowered himself to the ground, exhausted but alive. The hatchlings pressed against him, the adult dragon beside him, wings still raised. They had survived. Together. But outside the cave, the shadows shifted once more. Marcus caught a glimpse of movement far beyond the plateau. Larger shapes, glowing faintly in the distance, moving with deliberate purpose. Whatever had been testing them was only a small part of a far greater force. Marcus clenched his fists. He had protected the hatchlings this time, but the real challenge was still ahead. He looked at the dragons around him, exhausted, bleeding but alive. We've made it, for now, he said quietly. But this isn't over. Not even close. And then, in the far shadows of the canyon, a faint pulse, stronger, ancient, and deliberate, echoed toward them. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Something bigger is coming. Something older. Something that will change everything. The dust settled in the cave. Marcus leaned against a jagged rock, chest heaving, sweat and grime streaked across his face. The hatchlings clustered around him, their tiny wings fluttering weakly, pulsing faintly with life. The adult dragon sat nearby, tail coiled protectively, eyes scanning the shadows outside. They were alive. Against impossible odds, they were alive. Marcus allowed himself a brief moment to breathe. Every instinct, every decision had led to this fragile victory. He brushed his hand along one hatchling's back, feeling its pulse synchronize with his own heartbeat. You're safe now, for a while, he whispered, voice low but firm. The creature chirped faintly, almost in response, and Marcus smiled despite the exhaustion. The cave's walls still glimmered faintly with the alien symbols. Marcus traced his fingers along one ridge, realization dawning. These markings weren't just decoration. They were a map, a guide to survival, and perhaps a warning. Someone, or something, had left this knowledge behind. The hatchlings were not accidents. They were part of a network, a legacy meant to endure. And now, for the first time, Marcus understood why he had been chosen to protect them. A faint pulse outside the cave caught his attention. The adult dragon tensed, wings raising slightly. Marcus's hand instinctively went to the nearest hatchling, but the glow from its body reassured him. It was the same pulse he had felt before, the larger presence returning, watching but not attacking. He realized that survival wasn't about brute force. It was about trust, intelligence, and courage, the very qualities humans were known for. He scanned the horizon. The storm had passed, leaving the canyon bathed in an orange, fading light. The air was quiet, but Marcus knew better than to believe the danger was gone. Whatever had tested them, whatever force had lurked in the shadows, it was part of something larger, something ancient. The hatchlings and their kin were only the beginning. Marcus's mind shifted to the future. He would need a plan. The hatchlings were too fragile to survive alone, too small to escape the attention of hunters or predators. But together, guided wisely, they could endure. He set about reinforcing their shelter with rocks, metal panels, and any scraps he could find. Every decision mattered. Every action had consequences. He had learned that in war zones, in alien worlds, and now among creatures the world had abandoned. The adult dragon moved closer, nudging him gently. Marcus met its gaze, and for the first time he felt a bond deeper than instinct or survival. These weren't pets. They weren't trophies. They were beings of intelligence, of feeling, and he had earned their trust. He nodded once. "We'll face the world together," he said. The dragon rumbled low, wings folding slightly in acknowledgement. Night began to fall, and the hatchling's glow lit the cave softly. Marcus sat cross-legged, holding one against his chest, eyes never leaving the cave's entrance. The stars above were strange, distant, and yet familiar. He thought of the abandoned nests, the hunters, the unknown creatures he had faced. Every choice, every risk had brought them here. And yet, the real journey was just beginning. He imagined what awaited outside the canyon. New threats, larger mysteries, and perhaps allies he could not yet see. The hatchlings pulsed against him, their tiny signals almost a language he could feel. He realized that these creatures, left for dead by a world too fearful or indifferent to care, had found hope in a human. And perhaps in return they would teach him things no human had ever known. The wind shifted, carrying a faint vibration through the canyon. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Somewhere beyond the ridge, shadows moved, larger than the ones they had faced before. The hatchlings stirred, synchronized pulses flaring briefly. Marcus's jaw tightened. He was tired, battered, and tested beyond measure, but he was still standing. And he would not let fear decide their fate. He stood, gathering the hatchlings carefully, one by one. The adult dragon followed, its massive frame a protective presence. Marcus's mind raced with plans. Safe routes, hidden shelters, signals, and defenses. The canyon could only protect them for so long. Beyond it lay a world that had abandoned them, a world that would not understand, but one human could still make a difference. He paused at the cave's mouth, looking out across the orange expanse. Somewhere beyond, ancient forces, unknown predators, and perhaps allies waited. He felt a quiet determination settle over him. The hatchling's glow pulsed steadily now, a heartbeat that mirrored his own. "We move forward," he said, voice low but resolute. "Together." As they began to descend the ridge, Marcus glimpsed a faint glow on the horizon, larger than any hatchling, slower, deliberate. His pulse quickened. Whatever it was, it would change everything. The hatchlings pressed close, wings fluttering in nervous excitement, and the adult dragon spread its wings, ready to face whatever came next. Marcus glanced down at the smallest hatchling, nestled against his chest, and smiled grimly. "You've survived the impossible," he said. "But the world hasn't seen anything yet." And in the distance, beyond the canyon and the fading light, a shadow moved with intent, hinting at challenges and secrets far greater than Marcus, or anyone, had ever imagined. The story was far from over.